Welcome to Conversations. A pleasure to welcome to the program here a dear friend of mine. We go way back in terms of that. And he's billed as an economist, and he's also a scholar, and he's also a China expert. He's an expat from the United States, but he's got citizenship and vote. He's spending a great deal of time in learning and mingling in the culture of China over these past, decade and a half or so? About 8.5 years. And he knows the country really well. He's in very briefly here in New York, and he's been able to sit down with us here, and we can talk about some of these matters. And so, Bob, welcome so much. It's so good to see you again. It's been too long. You're looking great, man.
You too.
Okay, we're going to go over a quick thing, Bob, because you're an expert. You're a scholar, and you're also interested in economics. But you've got a good read on what's going on in the country of China as it relates to the world economy and so forth. But share just a real quick bio of yourself. You took degrees and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then let's talk about China in real terms by somebody who's been living there, knows the language now, and so forth. Share your own background real quick.
I wanted to make one point, is that I'm a dual citizen of U.S. and Canada.
Okay, so, try to talk up as much as you can. I know you got a little problem with the cold.
U.S. and Canada, dual citizenship. Well, I was born in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in China. I've been engaged in the Far East, also in Japan prior to that. But I got attracted to China. China's faced a lot of challenges. It's gone through a 30-year economic miracle. But now the chickens are coming home to roost. It's not now we're faced with a somewhat pessimistic future for China.
Is that really interesting? It is so, yeah.
Yeah, because of the difficulty of reforming. One of the problems is there's the if it ain't broke, don't fix it point of view, that when you're going through a boom, so why change anything? But that's your opportunity to change. Now there's a deceleration in the economy, so there's a reluctance to reform because it's going to impose costs, maybe slow down. Immediate in the short term, maybe slow down the economy even more.
I wonder if we could pause for a second. That would be reforming from place and order. And China was, in the terms of the Cold War and so forth, a communist nation.
Right.
And then Mr. Kissinger went, and there's been a big change. And we were talking off camera before about the new head of state and so forth, studied dialectical materialism and Karl Marx, and they still use the term communism, but the reality seems very, very different. And I wonder if you could, do they still teach Karl Marx as a political philosophy or economic philosophy?
Yes, they teach this.
And maybe you could set that right in terms of...
They continue to teach this. They teach us in high schools and so on, but you have an embedded system there of expertise in this particular ideology. It's almost like biblical study. And in fact, in philosophy departments, they have Marxist-Leninist schools. All they do is comment on Marxist texts. They don't deal with real problems. They don't do anything. There isn't much in the way of social science or psychology there. So this is a kind of legacy software that that persists there and goes on. Otherwise, you have to lay off a whole bunch of people. But the reality, developing alongside it is diametrically opposed to it. It's wealth creation. It's wealth accumulation. All a good number of the leaders, the most powerful people in the party have families. Individually, these leaders don't particularly enrich themselves, but their family members do. They take advantage of those positions.
Would you call it capitalism?
Yeah, but it's a simplified kind of. You could even call it a vulgar type of capitalism.
Vulgar capitalism.
And actually, I had a philosopher teacher once who coined the term vulgar materialism, which would be
rather than dialectical materialism.
Well, dialectical materialism is kind of nonsense because it's based on the principle of contradiction. And it's kind of promotes a tolerance for mixing rationally incompatible ideas.
But dialectical materialism is associated with Karl Marx.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, none of this is applicable. None of this is old legacy. This is 19th century stuff. It doesn't help manage the country's problems. Now, what you have is a simplified capitalist system, but it has something in common with Marxism. And what it has in common with Marxism is the view that everything is economics. economics determines and solves all problems. And so no need for social science, no need for psychology, no need for any of those other things. And so you could say an arch form of capitalism as well. It's
Market
enrichment.
fundamentalism, would that be fair to say?
Well,
Or
market fund is a little different.
Yeah.
It depends.
yeah.
But if you expand the capitalist notion to say all that matters and all that counts is economics, as if you can just control all these other things about human rights or these other sort of nebulous philosophical issues, they don't really matter. What matters is self-enrichment, okay? The Communist Party makes a pact with the people. We'll let you get rich. We'll help your economic well-being, but give us the prerogative to control everything else. And so you're happy, right? You're happy, you're making money, you're happy. It's a little bit, you know, the Clinton campaign originally said, it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
And actually, yes, economics drives election, but that's not everything. And
No,
and
it
there's a
isn't.
tendency in Marxism also believes in its economic determinism. The
Yeah,
class structure, economics drives everything else, and you have to pay attention. There's never any such
I
thing.
think
as-
you and I agree over long
Marxist
talks and so
exercise.
forth that the universe and evolution and human affairs, that the reality is synergetic. There's a behavior more than the sum of the parts, and that seems to be validated through physics and superstring and all that. So that any absolutist thing,
Right.
whether it's a religion or it's an economic philosophy or an absolutist kind of thing, is something that ought to be suspect by people who are thinking.
Right. So
Right.
what you have is this control, sort of thought control technology, which
Yeah.
is embedded, which it basically uses this Marxian framework to keep the structure in place. And you know, I guess one underlying theme in China is thought control. It's a technology. It's expected to be a legitimate tool. For example, you ban Facebook and so on. You prevent. It's called nipping in the bud. So when you get enough high-profile people talking too much on the internet, enough for people to start paying attention, you cut that off.
Yeah.
And so you keep discussion. Yes, there is freedom of discussion in China.
There is.
But it's in small packets. As
Yeah.
soon as any group organizes or gains any critical mass, or has the means to have critical mass, that's cut off immediately.
Yeah. I saw a thing on television here in New York one time, there's some years back, where they were talking about Tiananmen Square and the tank and all that. And they had a bunch of students there from the university in China, and they actually did not know what you were talking about. How can they have such a thing where something so indelibly in the minds of people, with a young man standing in front of the tank, not get through to the people to where it becomes part of their reality, or do they definitely self-censor to bring it up? Is there fear or something?
It's a
like,
very
what's the reality?
And I'll say this, it's a
Yeah.
very stupid thing, because Chinese students abroad, be they from the best universities, come across in the world as the most ignorant nation and the most ignorant people, because they do not know true history. They know only what the Communist Party has sanitized and presented and so on. Yes, they recognize mistakes, like the Cultural Revolution, but those are sort of, well, we strayed a little bit. So, and there's no deep discussion of it. So Chinese students are particularly ignorant of contemporary affairs.
Oh, really?
And this is a hallmark of China abroad, and it is a crying shame for this country, such intelligent people and the product of thought control, to come to, enter the rest of the world with that level of ignorance.
We do have complaint in this country, that we call it established media and so forth, that there's a number of views and everything come up, but we did a program last week from when you and I are taping. What's the date today?
The 29th.
29th of November, in the year is 2014 in the Christian
October.
It's of October.
October in the year, in the Christian year of 2014,
Yeah, it was-
just to
it's
make the
29th,
date.
actually.
But anyway, the Hidden Persuaders, there was a book by Vance Packard, you remember, and how much subliminally they can use it, and that they have there's a singular view of things that are presented by the establishment media, by extension perhaps the establishments around the world. Every state will do that, every people will do it, but it's particularly egregious in
Because you
China.
have an army and a police force backing it.
You have an army
We
in the
don't have
United
that
States
here.
of America.
Yes, but they don't back this up. They don't put people in jail here for this thought control.
Okay, you don't
They
think
don't
so?
put the fear of God in people, like in you, for having this program where people are going to say things and, routinely criticize
We had
the
a
system and
period
so
of
on.
McCarthy and so forth here, so there's
Yeah,
a
but
danger.
even that was very focused because there was an imminent Soviet threat, there was a whole issue about their developing.
The whole geopolitical thing.
Well, yeah, it was post-World War II, with, development of nuclear weapons. You had Stalinism at that time.
Yeah.
Everybody believed Stalinism was, not a good thing.
Yeah.
So, but that was kind of focused on people, but it wasn't a generalized, campaign against opponents of the, of the capitalist
So
system.
the thought control always, you have an establishment, they will want to have their own narrative understood by the people for political reasons and economic power and so on. It's characteristic almost of all our institutions and states,
Yes.
to a lesser or greater degree.
Well,
China is particularly egregious against freedom of speech, as it were.
Because there is alternative. If you have software, you can get out of the Great Firewall and view all the world media. In fact, until recently, all the Western newspapers were available online as long as enough. You see, the party's concern is this stuff not trickled down to the mass of people. If it stays among the elite, the Chinese who can speak English, they don't mind. They see these people are smart enough. In fact, they'll get the software. So it's understood that, elite, informed people, they're going to see this stuff. But the average Chinese, going to go Chinese media, it's a Chinese, none of this stuff's going to filter through to them. Okay?
Really?
And
In a particular,
so there's no
my
alternative media.
My contention is throughout all of human history, there's always been a little elite, political legitimacy is established by whoever's got the biggest club first. Then they get soldiers to support them in creation stories and ideology and so forth, support their view. And that's been characteristic of the whole of
Listen,
human
I think
history.
if we had to compare Nazi Germany and Roosevelt's America, I think there was a big difference.
Oh, yes.
China is more
What
like
point? Well,
China
take-
is more like Nazi Germany.
Really? That's a strong statement.
Well,
Is that bad?
I'm not trying to say, the racist undertones, but I am saying the party control, the centralization, the propaganda tools, the Goebbelsian sort of mindset.
Uh-huh.
That's received.
And you've been living there. How did you come to be a scholar here in the United States? You worked with Mr. Mundell, supply side, major economics and all that. How did you get the idea? Maybe share with us. You said 9 years ago?
Yeah.
I'm here, I got things going, I got contacts, you knew a lot of people, you've got a life going this way, and all of a sudden you decided you wanted to go to China. What prompted you to do that? And then from there, build and give us a true picture of an American who understands both sides of the coin, what the reality is that we can embrace and understand the world better.
Well, first of all, I helped to introduce, this is Robert Mundell, Nobel economist, 1999. Father of supply side economics, father of the euro. He was my teacher at Columbia. I helped introduce him to China in 1995. In 1995, when I was a student at Columbia, I had a Chinese roommate, and things went on from there. He became a rock star in China. He went there. His policy of
Mundell did.
Yes, he went there in '95 to teach at People's University, and his core idea is fixed exchange rates, and this was made to order for China's policy at the time. And for example, the Asian crisis in 1997, China refused to devalue, and that stopped the Asia financial crisis. So I became involved because at that time I had been working. My clients had been Japanese utility companies, electric companies, gas companies. My expertise in the energy, in the particular utilities, electricity, natural gas.
Right, you've been writing definitively on that.
And, the Wall Street Journal, I got involved in that
Street
also
Journal,
through my
yeah.
activities in Canada, opposing Quebec separatism and some economic problems in Canada at the time, and cross-culturally, it had the French nationalism in Quebec and so on. And then Mundell went to China, but I had an opportunity to participate in a Chinese event here in New York in 2005, and I was invited to. I actually arranged for Mundell to co-host an event in Beijing. So this is 10 years after he'd been in China. It was already well known. They also invited me to participate in that event, and I never went. I never came back. I stayed there. I did come back for short, back and forth, but I got engaged there, and I've been there ever since. The challenge in China, it's such a big country. It's very important. The problems there are very obvious, and are very very obvious. So for a Western expert, it's very easy to offer advice because the choices are pretty stark. But the political reality is otherwise. Some very obvious things, very obvious contradictions, can't be addressed. They're not allowed because this is just the modus vivendi. This is the accommodation that's been reached. I'll give you a perfect example.
Please.
We have the Hong Kong crisis now. Hong Kong people want one man, one vote, according to the spirit of the treaty with the UK. Last week, the Hong Kong, just days ago, the Hong Kong leader in a press conference of Western media said, we can't have one man, one vote, because it'll be a numbers game which will give poor people too much power in Hong Kong. And the head of Shimbun University, which is the one where all the leaders have graduated, including the current one, the head of the university previously spoke in Hong Kong and said, our job is to protect the rich people in Hong Kong. This is a Marxist-Leninist regime in Beijing saying, our job is to protect rich people, which, when you read further, is protect the wealth of the leaders' families in Beijing. So
sounds like capitalism.
What kind
to
of
me.
party is this? This should be, in my opinion, give up the word Communist Party. It's an oxymoron.
But they stick with it, don't they? The leader is an expert in Marx.
One has to understand something
Academically.
about Asian culture,
Yes,
and
please.
particularly the
Please.
Chinese. They're very traditionalist. They're very nostalgic. They give up old things very reluctant. And you had this embedded communist system, and you have old people, the party elders are still there. They can't bear to see that go away. So you have to wait for the old people to die, and so on. Right now, that party should just be called the party. That's enough. The party. In fact, that's what people say when they speak normally. Call it communist, there's no need. It's the party. It's the established party. Trying to identify it is kind of a no-win game. If you call it the capitalist party, so yeah, but there's Marxism. You call it the Marxist, there's capitalism. So okay, if it's a hodgepodge of this, negotiated factionalism that gives you some crazy quilt of a system and ideology, just leave it alone. Just call it the party. So but what you do is you have the absurdity of a party who's perceived to be protecting rich people.
Isn't it true in a certain sense that all evolution, we've all got reified institutions that are reified coming out of history. I remember once reading Mr. Keynes, and he said, we have a great capability that's emerging collectively in terms of our technology and so forth. But unfortunately, we're going to be able to see a millennial capability of exponential increasing capability for justice in terms of mass justice, as well as the ecology and so forth. But we've got these inherited institutions. We have to either subsume or deal with inherited institutions by which people get a sense of identity. So it's inherent that people are going to try and keep contact with the traditional one in which they get their identity wrapped up. So it's not a thing that's easy to change just overnight like that. That's universal.
Institutional inertia.
Okay.
But you add on the traditionalism of East Asian culture, not just China, it's just Japan, although Japan is far further ahead in terms of having an open society. But you have this embedded in Confucianism, filial piety, the parent, the elder. It's kind of an inversion of our culture where the Pepsi generation is the young people. The old people are over the hill. We don't pay attention to that, where they're too expensive to keep as employees. We don't care about their historical knowledge. So
we probably used to set the old people on ice floes
in the past. You say, well, no, we don't need those, but they may have a kind of perspective about risk and have some experience. So, so in these Asian cultures, the elderly count for much more. And this is
you mean in respectful terms?
Yeah, and engagement and in the evolution. So these older things, these older traditions carry much more weight than they do in Western countries. We're prepared to sort of change with the weather, the flavor of the month.
Yeah, we're sort of
and we have systems that kind of take care of all the
We're newer.
We don't have a culture that
it's a hodgepodge
that sanctifies
right.
Asian experience, and East Asian cultures have this. It's in Confucianism and deference to parents and deference to the elders and so on. And so this is what makes institutional inertia a far greater problem
That's really
in places like China. And
Yeah.
it's embedded in the Communist Party and it's 1950s type management. It's all 1950s legacy stuff. Old people, the average age in the Communist Party is too old. They don't have enough young people, and you just have an apparatus. There are people with useless jobs that go. There was a judge. They can't keep judges in China because one judge complained. He gave up his job. We have to read speeches. We have to study speeches. A leader gives a speech. Like, what's so hot about speech writing? Speech writing is speech writing. Guys write a speech. No speech is so important that you have to study it. No, this is Communist Party routine. Party members, you're a judge. You're not encouraged. Go read law books. Develop the legal system. Go read treatises. Read Roscoe Pound. Read all these great things. Oh no, read leaders' speeches. Conform. It's like the army. The leaders' orders.
Like the army. Well, the army is very militaristic.
Well,
I mean,
the
it's structured.
organized.
It's not. I was in the army.
Yeah.
You were in the army.
Yeah. No.
Were you in the army? I was
No,
drafted
no,
in the army. I was a
no.
buck private. I used to explain to the sergeants
Right.
that we could do things democratically, and they said, "Get back in line." And it's very militaristic.
That's not
and
the
the world
nature
is
of the
very
beast.
military.
However,
Yeah.
what our armies do have in the West, which is, the problem in Asia, is we do delegate discretion lower down. So in the battlefield, leaders, the commanders in the battlefield don't have to worry they're going to be cut down because they decided, on the seat of the pants to do it this way rather than that way. So we do grant leeway in terms of, real-time adjustment to lower ranks. Okay, but this is this top-down approach is militarist, and you have to understand Chinese
Isn't
history.
it?
Chinese reform.
Yeah.
In the 19th century, there was a leader. He became, after the emperor deposed Yuan Shikai, he became leader of China. Reform came
Of the
through-
whole of China.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
for a period in the teens or
okay.
early 20s, and he became a dictator. But he was a reformer. The military was one of the vehicles of reform. Why? Because the military was the only kind of organization and government that Chinese could run 100%. All the other organizations, the railways, all these companies, they were all run by Westerners. Chinese would work there, they would learn. But there was one thing Chinese could do by themselves, run completely, was a political party, the government, but particularly par excellence, the army. So the army also likes technology.
Yeah,
so all
right.
this new stuff,
And
the
war,
army.
yeah.
Well, they had civil war. That was
Oh,
a big
yeah.
expertise in
Yeah.
China. But the army was a vehicle for importing foreign technology. They were foreign technology friendly because so they promoted that. They also promoted education. Yuan Shikai was when he was governor in Shandong province, promoted education. They were big education reformers.
Right.
So there's a tradition where the military and the army, because it was an organization Chinese could operate 100%, would develop the country. And this tradition is still persistent to a large extent in this kind of higher top-down structure, militaristic, even party discipline. It's 100%. You can debate all you want. There are debates. It's usually behind closed doors, not in public. But once the party, the organization decides, you shut up.
That's it. Yeah.
If they agree on 50 points, that's it. You're not allowed afterward to go and criticize any of that. If you dare do that, you're out. So there's this military reform, same thing in the military. So it's a militaristic organizational mindset that does this, and it's nationalistic based because it's saying we're Chinese, we're still underdeveloped. The only way we can do things by ourselves is to do it in a military fashion, just like we've done historically.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And as if we open up, we're going to weaken ourselves, we're going to fragment, and so on, and then the Westerners are going to come in and sort of take over.
Another opium war or something.
Well, but it's legacy thinking that's kind of.
And yet, over these past things, ever since Mr. Kissinger and company went there, 72 or so, and there's been a big change in everything. And there's been tremendous, it's touted all the time in the international economic press, tremendous rates of growth they've exhibited. And they're buying a lot of our treasury bills, or relating to them. So maybe we could talk about the economic miracle that I heard about in China, and that, the people are saying they're going to take over the world and that kind of thing. But maybe address that. What's the reality?
It's run its course.
It has run its course now.
Yeah.
That's only a couple of decades.
But it was based on construction. It was based on, first of all, it was based on new stuff. It wasn't so much, they did go through a period of closing down reforming the state sector in the late 90s, but sort of reform. But that kind of stopped, and nowadays state-owned companies, everyone's expecting there should be reform. Their role in the economy is still too much. But what it was opening new parts of the economy. That's how they got the party elders to accept it. Say, don't worry about it. We're going to open these new sectors to foreign trade and so on. These development zones. We're going to invite all these multinationals to come in here
and
do their assembly
and they've gone
and use Chinese labor.
Cheap labor, right?
Well, entirely in Chinese terms, it was better than what they had.
Yeah, but in terms of international order, what you have to pay.
Well, that's how it happens in
New Jersey.
If there's a price difference, you don't automatically jack it up. You usually choose something in the middle. And then it sort of gradually, changes. So everything was fine as long as you could develop this export economy. You could develop a construction, real estate, infrastructure economy. You have all these farmers willing to cheap labor. They all move to the cities. They build all this infrastructure. Now there's too much of the infrastructure.
I saw a thing on television. You were saying it reflects reality. They got these great big, beautiful, upscale buildings that are built, and there's not a single person living in them.
Well, you reach a limit. There's only so much. What they never emphasized, and this is where it was lacking, is how to use this stuff. And have a usage economy that's based on consumption. It's based on business. It's based on providing for smaller business. It's based on discovering new needs and providing new kinds of services.
And making new technological developments is coming exponentially.
Well, which is also a mindset issue, for people and taking risk and doing all these other things to use all this capacity. So there's been little emphasis placed on usage and to serve consumers. It's been to serve the greater interests of China, growing the economy. How do you do it fast?
Accumulating
capital. The fastest way is through construction, which is kind of state mandates. The state can't manage consumption. They can't take consumers. You consume this, you do that.
Well, also you have to have effective buying power. Lord Keynes, when he was talking back in the 30s and everything, he said, "We got this capability. You can see it. It's in the but for a long time we're going to have to live with fair as foul and foul as fair as we incorporate from the old coming out of the new. But the new future has a great promise."
Right. But what happened in China?
100 years, he was saying, from 30.
Production is easy to centrally control.
Okay.
To make a decision.
Okay. Increasingly so.
Produce that. So that's why the growth was so fast and rapid and so easily done.
Didn't it also accommodate, if I may, we had a revolution in transportation. Containerization made it possible to be all kinds of economies of scale and everything, where you could global. We couldn't have done that 20 years before then or anything. It's just it's a thing of the time, right?
Well, China
they had growth rates of 15% or something on a steady basis, or something like that. That's amazing, and everybody was saying the Chinese miracle.
But the growth rates were exaggerated. So
were they really?
We have an issue of truth and statistics. That, if it's 7% now, in reality, it's more likely 5%, 4%. And what's going to happen in China is they're going to revert to normal economic growth. The super growth period is in. That's based on the migration from the countryside to the city, and population growth. Population growth is going to stop within a few years.
They got a one-child thing or something.
Well, they've had that, but even if they change that, it takes too long for them to catch up.
Also, hasn't the growth been like Shanghai, Beijing, and that, but out in the West, where you've got people that the growth rate and the increased standard of living is going up. You got some middle, upper middle, and upper classes there, but out in the West, you've got a whole lot of people living on $1 a day, and there's a lot of these,
in the rural areas,
particularly to the West.
In the rural areas, especially rural out there, the standard, the economic level isn't as high. They have a program of urbanization.
I also saw a thing once, Bob. I don't know where it was, just to get it in my head, but that there were a lot of instances of attempted dissent among people that was, ruthlessly or cleverly or suppressed.
Yeah.
Tiananmen Square. How can a student in the University of in China not know 10 years out about Tiananmen Square?
Because it's a Leninist information
system. Okay, but that's really tight control.
There's number one. Number two is fear factor. Even if
that's always awkward.
You're not going to talk about it. So it's just, or it'll be discussed among friends in private, but there's no general, public, nothing allowed.
Yeah.
what you have in China is you have social issues. Because of this construction economy and because of the restriction in the financial system, there's nothing else to invest in but real estate. The stock market went nowhere in China after
Really?
2007.
Why is that? Why didn't that develop well as it could
Because
have or
the stock
possibly
market
could?
is
Yeah.
a leading indicator of
Yeah.
the economy, number one. So the stock market's been telling people for a long time that the Chinese economic miracle is over.
Well,
Okay.
how long time? 5 years?
2007, it peaked.
It
Okay.
peaked 2007,
Yeah,
right
it's
about before the whole
going
damn
down.
thing
Yeah.
crashed on a
Before
world
ours,
scale.
so it was kind of a leading indicator.
Okay.
Number two, it was driven by the elite. And we'll get into this about buy and sell. But the elite knew when to buy and they knew when to sell.
Yeah.
And they do. The government was even promoting selling in 2007 because they were worried that stock prices would be so high that when it does crash, too many poor people are going to lose too much money. So they wanted to control this a little bit. So, you know, the stock market, the financial system. So there was no other option but continue to invest in property. Property became the only option.
Really?
Number two, banking reform. You know, when you got a loan in China, there was no money market. There's no, interest rate market determination of interest rates. There's no true money market like what we have between banks. Where banks on a minute to minute are trading cash.
Not a second to not
Their
a second.
cash balances and so on determines interest rates. You don't have that. When you get a loan in China,
Yeah.
normally you get a loan here. You get a sort of a
In the
line,
States,
a line
you're
of
talking.
credit. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't draw down the entire loan up front.
Yeah.
You take, as if it's a construction project, the bank goes to the money market that day and gets if you need so many funds this week or whatever,
Yeah.
you tell the bank, they go out and get the money on the money market, give it to you. Because that's not the way
But they would
it's
be
been in
at-
China. You take all your money from a loan up front and then you invest the unused cash in real estate. And
in
then
real
when you
estate,
need the
yeah,
cash,
yeah.
you just liquidate the real. So the real estate market doubled, not just as a real estate market,
Yeah.
which is what it's supposed to be building buildings for use.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
see they have
Yeah,
a lot
building
of
for
them haven't
use,
been used because you get rental income from
Mhm.
that. It wasn't built for income. It was built for capital gain
Right.
because there was nothing else to invest in. So more and more people, and as companies were getting more loans, and as the government after the financial crash, freeing up more credit and so on, the proceeds would just get invested. The unused cash proceeds from the loan would just be invested in real estate, pushing up the real estate price.
Wasn't there an awful lot of
Okay.
investment of some of that cash flow in U.S. Treasury bills as
Yes,
safe
also.
harbor? Isn't that in large measure?
That's
They have a whole
those
lot.
are
They
the
hold a
foreign,
lot of our
those
debt.
are
do
the
they
foreign
not?
currency reserves
Yeah.
held mainly foreign currency reserves held by the central bank because of capital controls on other Chinese ability to invest abroad. Number one, the reluctance of Chinese companies to invest abroad or to have the know-how to invest abroad. That's changed a little bit, especially as all these wealthy Chinese actually do want to move capital out of China, do want to invest abroad.
Yeah, it's-
But the government
Globalized.
is the buyer and seller of currency of last resort.
Uh-huh.
They keep the exchange rate managed by using those reserves. So, for example, if the Chinese currency, if there's pressure on it to devalue like there is today, the Chinese government takes those treasury bonds and sells some of them
On the international
for renmin.
Yeah, yeah.
And they get renminbi in exchange for that.
What is
Okay?
renminbi?
Well, that's their local currency.
Oh, okay.
And so, they basically go into the market and
Robert,
buy.
we're friends. Try to talk to the
Yeah,
camera
yeah.
as much as you can.
If too many people are selling Chinese currency, the Chinese government will go sell some of their treasury bonds and buy the currency to keep the price. If there are not enough buyers, the currency is going to devalue.
Yeah,
So
right.
they go and sell some of those treasury bonds, and then they become buyers of their currency to level off, to meet the demand.
You seem to be saying that there are problems in China that maybe we're not aware of, and the Chinese miracle that's been touted over these last a couple of decades or something like that is coming to a crescendo or a break point
Because
or a
the easy
change.
money is finished. There's only so much capacity. For the past several years, I've traveled to all kinds of Chinese cities, east and west, north and south. Every city has dead construction projects, empty buildings. You see it all over the place.
Yeah, empty buildings.
Across the street from where I live, there's a building they started in 2007.
You live in Beijing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not finished. It's still not finished, And I tell my friends this represents the Chinese economy. It's ever going to be finished, ever going to fulfilled. So there's a lot of pressure for fundamental reform in the party.
In the party itself?
Yeah, of
is there
course.
dissent within the party and
Of course there
argumentation?
but
Is that allowed?
Nobody's allowed to look at it. We're allowed
Nobody,
to
I'm sorry, I
speculate
didn't hear
on
the
it.
word. Nobody is
Nobody's
or
allowed
everybody?
to look at it.
Oh, nobody's
It
different than
happens
everybody.
behind
Yeah.
closed doors, but people speculate on it.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
It's a lot of it in our
I
press.
should think there would be, because that's what the economic process is about, is
Right.
dealing with the various levels of risk and
But
advantage.
the ability, you've got vested interest in China, you have all this embedded wealth and so on. You know, stability is the byword. In other words, until now, in its growth, there were only winners. Now China's reached the point where for a winner, there's going to be a loser.
Zero
And the
sum.
party, it's become more zero sum.
Yeah. Right.
And the party is faced with the problem of how to manage losers.
Do you think it because, oh, well, that is a problem. I think,
Because the
think,
pact before was go along with this economic, and we're all going to be winners, and now it's impossible for everybody to be winners. For example, the property owners who bought this thing, they're going to have to start losing because the property value is too high. People can't afford to buy an apartment. You know, one of the things China did in beginning its reform is the state owned all the apartments.
Yeah.
They gave the apartments to all the Chinese
Okay.
people. If you lived in it, you own it. You have it now.
was that done in the name of socialism or?
Oh, it's a kind of capitalistic type, what they call, you know, socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Uh-huh.
The state owned it,
With-
we're giving it to the people, but each individual now owns his own apartment.
How does it work? We think in America or in the world economy, you have a private sector and a public sector.
Yeah.
Do they have that clear division there? And how does it work out? Or is it all state control, all socialist? They use the term
No, but,
socialist.
you know,
But it's hard to equate socialism with a very authoritarian system like you're saying.
I don't think it's hard to create socialism, authoritarian system. A lot of, you know, you've had.
Well,
capitalistic type-
idealistically, I mean, you know, like
Yeah.
the socialists
You know,
represent the
but
masses.
in the socialism, unlike Marxism, was the state owned everything, so if the state controls things.
Well, that's
it's-
true. There's different kinds of socialism.
Well,
There's
communism was,
national
the state was
socialism.
an interim
Yeah.
condition, and then eventually.
But say the left in this country would see socialism as a panacea toward all the concentrated wealth and so forth,
Yeah.
and that kind of I think, but that doesn't particularly hold. But I wonder if that does hold, and I wonder if we could bring up something we did in a conversation just when you came to visit briefly, unfortunately. But this fellow Thomas Piketty, who was saying that, and as I understand, I don't know, is he known or recognized by the leadership in China? And he's saying the problem is we have a technological capability that's expanding exponentially, let's just say on two vectors. One would be destructive or military capability, that you have a great capability that's coming from the technological development. And on the other side, you've got life support, what Bucky Fuller might call life support, for a greater numbers of people, and the number of people that could be seen to be able to have the capability in terms of productive capability collectively, and it's coming over the transom every day, breakthroughs in every field, and so it's coming to a kind of crescendo. But the problem that Mr. Piketty points out and so forth is they don't have a way of forming capital, let's say, in a way where you're investing in the future, not just out of past savings, but out of the earnings of the future. And they don't have a way of distributing effective buying power to the masses of the people where the technology doesn't need the people, and that's a problem that's confronting the whole world. And is that dealt with in Chinese terms or
No,
with
it's
your
too,
colleagues?
it's too advanced, and it's something they don't even want to touch or talk about rich and poor, because the divide between rich and poor is growing. It's worse in China than it is in this country.
Worse than
And
here.
getting
It's
worse.
very
Of course it
concentrated
is.
here, as you can
Well,
see.
because
It's
you
just
have an
going on.
authoritarian system that's dedicated to
Well, we don't have an
preserving the wealth.
authoritarian system
Yeah,
here,
the
and it's all
system is
going to a few
authoritarian.
handful of people.
One of there was a
The
study
ownership.
done that was released this week.
A what?
There was a study done. I
Oh,
believe
study.
I don't know if it was the World Bank and so on,
Yeah.
that attributed. It didn't explain how big a share this was in explaining the whole wealth divide.
Yeah.
But it's buy and sell investment securities,
Yeah,
stocks.
right.
Typically, poorer people sell at the wrong time and they buy at the
I
wrong
saw an
time.
article in the Times.
And rich
about
people
the other day.
do the opposite.
Yeah.
Okay, they have more knowledge, the
Right.
information. They tend to buy, they have excess wealth at the time. They tend to buy at the right time when everybody else is selling out of fear, and they sell when everybody's,
They got the
Buying
they got the capability.
So
they
how
have
do you
to-
explain it? How do you deal with this fact? But
Yeah.
does this account for a quarter of the wealth divide? But I have difficulty coming to a conclusion on this, and it's
Yeah.
not an easy question.
Yeah, right.
If naturally less successful economic people make less successful investment decisions. What do you do about that? You know, I mean, it's part of the nature of things. Naturally, the people are, you know, one solution is you want to generalize education, you want to make sure that people are more educated. But as a matter of fact, some people will, it's when they time their investments, they'll buy and sell at the proper time. And this is a natural way to explain some of the wealth divide since one of the big developments during our low growth economy, which hasn't helped workers, but it's been a boon to investors. So if the investors, guess who those investors are making a boom? It's not the poor people. They're still too afraid to
it's the people who got accumulated capital.
It's the people that had it. They're more risk tolerance on. So I don't see that as something sinister. But what I do see as sinister is when you're making money because of corporate welfare. And that's what you have in China. What I mean by corporate welfare is the rich people have an in with the state.
Well, we have it here too, don't we?
And but it's not, you know, they're natural things, and I agree with corporate welfare, and there are a lot of conservatives,
there's a lot of
people who are anti-corporatist and so on that don't want any of that stuff.
There's a lot of that larding up the economy. But it's everywhere, I think. Okay.
You know, and
so
if the wealth accumulation, the wealth difference in China is happening not because of this buy-sell discrepancy, although this happened during the stock market boom that ended in 2006, it's happened in the real estate in 2007, sorry. And it's happened to, you know, greater or lesser extent in the real estate market, where wealth in China comes not from how smart you are at gauging the market and buying and selling. It's how strong the relationship is with the government officials who dispense everything's empowered through the state and so on, and then those officials, instead of being paid a salary, they're paid in corruption payments, which equals what they would receive as a normal salary. Don't
want to beat this horse to a dead standing and everything, because that's how. But I wonder. Okay, that's really interesting, and it's a view of the China that we don't know. So somebody who knows both sides of the ocean know it well, and I really appreciate you doing that. I wonder if we could veer off a little bit culturally. It's an incredibly interesting culture, and it's very diverse. I wonder if you could maybe give us a view of that. You've got Cantonese, you have two languages, that's sort of some of those things that make China so interesting, and you enjoy very much your time in China and your association with it and your learning, and share some of the cultural differences or the characteristics of the Chinese culture, negative, positive, but just some. We only got a few minutes left, but
you know, there are always many Chinas. That's one
many Chinas.
Advantage and a disadvantage. The Chinese is a disadvantage. They say, oh, we were fragmented dialects and so on. We weren't unified. That enabled foreigners to come in here and so-called divide and conquer and so on. You know, they have this term splitism. Oh, if you split people, they're factions. Oh, then we become weak. We have to be unified. We have to be monolithic. But in fact, China is not a monolith. It's achieved a certain monolith. You know, the characters through administrative mechanisms and Leninism, like the party. But this diversity is very good, because you can try different things in different parts of China. You know, we have two Chinas, Taiwan, and what used to be called the two-China policy. That's one China. But you have Hong Kong, you have Taiwan. They also, you know, exemplify Chinese people.
We also have a difference between Mandarin and
Cantonese. And China's ability to modernize and so on. So there's no need to use mainland China as a representative of all Chinese culture. Yes, you have Southern Chinese. Southern Chinese were more pragmatic, more business-oriented. You know, even the nature of the language. Southern Chinese, Cantonese, is more like ancient Chinese.
Do you know? Can you speak both? You speak very.
No, Cantonese. Forget about it.
You Mandarin, you know really well. You got that down, right?
Mandarin's made to order for foreigners because it uses simplified Chinese characters.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, they had different characters.
Now, does he realize unification of country required an easier language that all?
Does that apply? Does that go out into the West also, China?
Yeah, but
you have tribal languages.
West was particular. You have 46 nationalities in China.
46 nationalities.
But those other nationalities are maybe like 10% of the population, but most of it is, you know. Although in the Northeast you have Manchu people. Mongoloid. But and they ran China for 300 years.
Yeah, that's true. Not a small 300 years is a pretty good run.
Was the Qing dynasty. So, you know, so this is healthy. And in fact, I was in Xinjiang at a conference, tried to tell Chinese's cultural diversity is very good. They officially like this, but there are policies that tend to disadvantage, people, and they have development policy to move Han Chinese and to develop these regions and so on, but the Han Chinese take the best opportunities. It tends to leave a bad flavor in the mouth of a lot of these minority people.
Yeah,
So,
right.
like they have more to learn from other countries and Western countries how to manage these cultural issues, not just do it by taking a hard line and accusing people who criticize government policy of being aligned with terrorists or separatists or whatever, just classifying them all with the extremists and then taking appropriate measures against them. That's too primitive. But what you do have is an embedded bureaucracy of not very educated people who only know how to do it one way.
Do they use that terminology, political leaders, or the terrorism, like we're using here for
do.
anybody that doesn't go along
There's a
with
tendency.
us?
Well,
in a sense?
we're not extremists like that. Listen, the U.S. government's concerned about one thing and one thing only. They don't want an atomic bomb to go off in Manhattan.
Well, thank you. I don't want the atomic bomb and a hydrogen capability that, I swear to God, Bob, it remains species lethal, the weapons system.
Listen, we're
only
worried
from
about,
about 1970 in our time.
We're worried
That's
about
one vector.
We're worried about terrorists doing real terrorism. That's what our security is all about. Not in China. In China, as I'll bring back, they want to nip at the butt. So anybody who says something that could conceivably, dovetail with terrorism, to say, oh, we have a social problem here. Let's say Uyghur people are oppressed.
Yeah.
Oh, the terrorists use that. Say, oh, we're oppressed. Okay, let's take action.
Do they throw
But
that?
all people that say that, they don't agree that terrorist provinces will take that and say, oh, he's a terrorist because he's saying something that the terrorists can use, and so therefore that if that's contributing 1% of the thought that terrorists use, that's also terrorism. They just put a professor in jail in the West, a well-known guy who was teaching in Beijing.
Yeah.
Because he was a critic of government policy. He didn't believe in separatism and so on. But they put him in jail, and he said, in our opinion, that did enough that encouraged people to be too critical, and maybe someone could decide they want to become terrorists. So the whole nipping in the bud philosophy is overkill. It's killing a cockroach with a sledgehammer. There's collateral damage. You're killing the innocent and the people, and you're just making people too afraid.
Do you think that's happening maybe in lesser degree, but it's characteristic of the international order writ large?
No, it's not. China's all exaggerated. And one of the themes in China is job protection. That's what's behind a lot of the conservative resistance.
Even for make work things and the bureaucratic.
Well, it's these bureaucrats, these people that manage this stuff in those places don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want any big
Well, people don't want to lose their jobs.
They counter reform in there, but they have more power than they do here. It's not just sort of labor unions. So they're all members.
Our labor unions, the private sector, down about 5% now. They have practically no power whatsoever.
The reason they don't want democracy there is they don't want to work. You have people who have devoted their lives working the bureaucracy, the Communist Party, advancing. They don't want all that to disappear. They suddenly become nobodies, and they have to start from scratch.
Well, that's
just like happened in the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
They don't want to give up all that, their achievement. It's a natural thing.
Yeah, that's again reified institutions, and the most dangerous thing about that is people get their identity by those reified institutions.
Of course.
And do you sense there's a qualitative change going on in the world when you've got the weapon systems that, from the modeling, they don't want to say it, that if there was a Syria 1914 or something, and there was an unleashing of the weapons, we now have an extended conscious capability on weapon systems, which has been the basis by which political authority has been established for political legitimacy by who's got the biggest club or the weapons capability to conquer or whatever, that if they were unleashed, it would mean the end of the Homo sapiens species.
Yes, but let me.
No, wait a minute. That's not that couldn't have happened in 1924 or 1916 or 600 or any time back through all of history. We've got to lay us on with the new existential reality in the universe, right? And then on the other side, there's all these people, Diamantes, Kurzweil, Google, all of these things that are going, and it's exponentially increasing. The capability, climate warming is a big thing. They do coal, I guess, in China, but they have existential a comprehensively understood capability, not the reality. You got reified institutions, but a capability to provide for all of humanity in their projection in a way where we may actually be transcending at a level of capability material scarcity, which has been the context in which all of history has unfolded, or is that dawn anywhere, or should it among the Chinese, the Americans, or the intellectual class
I'll
of the
try to
world?
summarize this for you.
Thank you.
With the development of technology, okay, comes the ability to do great damage. Technology
And
makes
also
us-
great promise.
There's great promise, but correspondingly is the ability to do great damage, and correspondingly there's an increased vulnerability to the whole system. If we have atomic war, guess what happens? All the memories, all the records we have, they're all erased. It's all magnetic or whatever,
Wait a
storage
minute,
means.
no,
When we
I
have
posit-
paper records, at least they could last
Yeah,
for
but
100
records are one
years.
thing you bury, but I'm talking about the smuggling that you can find. That if it was unleashed, full tilt boogie,
Yeah.
we can't establish, we gotta do this, and it could be happening very easily, spark. It would mean, apparently, the end of the Homo sapiens
Listen,
species.
If there were
Do you think that's true?
If we were at an atomic war and we lost all records, could you reproduce the level of human knowledge we have within one generation? Could
What are you
people go
talking
back
about? There would be
and
no
learn
chance.
stuff?
No, if it were to happen,
No,
I'm trying,
but
you're avoiding the point. If you want to, go
No,
ahead.
I agree with
Yeah,
you. I'm just.
No, you agree with
I'm
the
just
findings?
citing a softer case
Oh.
that where you would make the same conclusion. There's not one generation wouldn't even have enough time to go replace. There would be a
There
net
would
loss
be
of
no
human
next
knowledge.
generation.
Right, but
No, but that's only
Yeah.
characteristic of the time you and I sit here and talk, and it's got nothing, it is not the case, Rob, that we're we're at a point in universe at an existentially challenging and promising transformation of the human condition with an ecological
we
context.
can also have
And-
great damage. It can be very promising, very bad.
Great damage
But
to the
Thomas-
point where we wipe out every
Of course
single
it could.
human being.
And
You think
here's-
that's true?
Yes, but
Is
you
it
have
ever
to
so?
focus
Yeah.
on China because China is
Okay.
the biggest threat now to global order by empowering its nuclear forces and so on, and on a national rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, and now expansionist. As,
Oh, yeah.
Now
Yeah, okay.
Aquino, the president of the Philippines, said
Yeah.
China is now like Germany in the 1930s. Ladies
Wow.
around Sudetenland.
Yeah.
They're talking about this. And if this gets carried too far, through a
Yeah.
pact between the Chinese president and the military that
Yeah,
supports him.
yeah,
Now he's
yeah.
reforming the military,
Mhm.
but there's still, a need to appeal to that. That could pose a threat. If there were atomic, China wouldn't be nuts enough to launch atomic war.
Well, yeah,
But
but
there's
nobody
a-
would.
there's
It
a
wouldn't be any
physical-
more rational
There's
or
a physical,
politically
well,
bad
we
or
could be
risk
headed now to
factor.
a new,
Mm.
nuclear balance issue.
Well,
That's-
maybe-
it was
maybe
finished
there's
with
a-
Russia, but we could have a new
We have brought
situation
down
with
the
the
stockpile,
Chinese and
yeah.
with the United States, and we have nuclear forces.
Okay,
we
well-
have this whole, mutual assured destruction scenario
Yeah.
all over again.
Yeah, right.
There we've got to be
Only
careful.
within our lifetime.
Well, this.
Ever.
No, this can be in the next few years.
No, but I'm saying this capability, both for good
Yeah.
and let me summarize. We could
I know.
annihilate
That's
the
right.
Homo sapiens species, or we could liberate
That's right.
the Homo sapiens
which is
species
that-
in our
what's-
time, in this generation,
what's human
10,000
I know.
generations. Can we get their idea about this is not a normal period of history? This is a unique moment in evolutionary terms.
So-
Is that dawning anywhere in China or in their thing? Or
No, they're just thinking of one thing.
well, it
China.
should be on the
They're
table.
thinking of China.
Okay.
But
Most
they
people
also
are.
know from rationality that China alone doesn't make any sense. First of all, China is now a big portion of the global economy.
Yeah.
The global economy fails, China fails.
Yeah,
If
right.
China fails, the global economy, huh? Yeah,
Tibet.
the global economy is also.
She said something about Tibet. What about Tibet?
Tibet.
Yeah.
The Tibet issue, I'll tell you,
We only got a couple minutes.
summarizes
Use
this.
haiku.
Why is the Dalai Lama a bad guy? Because in 1989, a few months after Tiananmen, the Dalai Lama had the effrontery to accept the Nobel Prize, which
Yeah.
was the world community's statement of disapproval of Tiananmen. The Chinese the Communist Party will never forgive him for that because he was a friend of Chairman Mao. He was a friend of Deng Xiaoping. Deng
Yeah,
Xiaoping
yeah.
died in 1992.
Uh-huh.
And so on, ever since, and the successors ran, Hu Jintao was president, he ran things in Tibet and so on. The Dalai Lama will never be forgiven for that effrontery. The Chinese have a great difficulty separating personal feelings and personal matters from their role as government or government. Your role as a government is a job. Your personal feelings have nothing to do with it. They still have a great difficulty
Right. And
separating
that's tied
those two
into their
things.
long
A government official represents all Chinese, not just the Chinese that agree with the Communist Party or are loyal to the Communist. It represents dissenters. You have to treat everybody equally,
Well-
regardless of their approval or disapproval of government policy.
And global
And-
warming is emerging. I
and
see
it's-
400,000 people in the streets of New York
No, I
yesterday about
understand.
global warming. It was a huge thing. And aren't they doing a lot of coal in China?
Of course they do.
Yeah,
but
okay.
they
And
contribute
even
to
the,
that. It's
well-
not even global warming. There's local pollution that's killing people.
well, okay, there's a lot of questions. One of the problems we have in cable television, or in any television for that matter, is we run out of time.
Yes.
Are we running out of time on a planetary evolutionary scale? But anyway, we're going to have to say goodbye now.
Yeah.
And hello, goodbye. Groucho Marx, I said, you should do. But anyway, so good to welcome you back to New York in this very brief stay. Glad we were able to get together. And it's been your problem to have your pleasure to have the perception of Robert Blohm, energy economist and also a China expert, emerging ever more so, and even appearing in the media and so forth, as someone who can understand that very important
And
part of
let
the
me
world.
make a tribute to you.
Hurry up.
You are a national treasure, Harold, and you are the longest serving, talk show host in this country. So
Well, yeah, like that. My mother would agree with you, I think. Oh, God, so that's
You're a
good, you know.
national treasure.
Anyway, thanks a lot for you, and we'll be coming back again tomorrow. So thanks a lot, Bob. Bon voyage back to Beijing, and keep working, and we've got to stay in touch with
It's
you.
very exciting.
Yeah, it's an
And
exciting,
the key
it's an
point there
exciting time to be
Is to
alive.
be constructive, and I tell the Chinese, your best friends criticize you. They don't say kiss you behind.
That's right.
So I say, be that. An American official once, a military guy, told me, why do you tell the Chinese you're doing this wrong? We want them to make mistakes. We want them to do this. So I tell that story to the Chinese.
Befriend your,
I try to help you. I try to tell you what you're doing.
yeah, befriend your biggest enemy who is most against you, if you can. That's the thing. Okay, we're out of time, folks. Thank you for viewing. We'll come back again tomorrow. Thanks a lot, Bob.
Thanks.
Bon voyage. Right.